Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Up the Dale podcast. This time, we're back to the old format. We're going to be looking at a little bit of Watley Dale news, a little bit of general cricket news, and also we're going to be carrying on with our Tales from the Dale feature that we started with Mick Berry, and we're very happy to have another special guest join us tonight. First of all, I'll introduce my co-host, Mr. David Maguire. Good evening, David.
Evening, Mr. Harvey. How are we doing?
We're very well. And the gentleman below us is I'm going to not use the term lightly, Gareth, is a Dale legend. He is our current treasurer, but all-round non-spinning spinner and batting superstar, Mr. Gareth Winstanley. Good evening, G.
Evening, Neil. Evening, Dave.
Evening, Jay. How are we?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad.
We've brought Gareth on because Gareth has been with the club many years. I'll not say how many to embarrass you, Gareth, but and along with Naz forms a formidable partnership of two good friends who've gone back many years, and we're going to get Naz on as well at some point. And Gareth not only has remarkable figures on play cricket for Palace Shield matches, but also Gareth went a long time back into the old Chorley League that Watley Dale were in before the Palace Shield, and has a lot of history in that league. So we'll hopefully touch on that in Tales from the Dale. We're going to start off with a bit of Watley Dale news, as we always do. And first of all, the virtual matches we've been doing. We do run them on Cricket 19. We live stream them, and we also try and do some match highlights. Although that is we've fallen back behind a little bit with that, but we're going to catch up this week with the match highlights. The Cricket 19 matches, something that we hadn't touched on recently, are now very kindly sponsored by our main kit sponsors. You can see on the shirt there, Stonehouse Homes. The guys at Stonehouse, and particularly Mark, are good supporters of the club, and they agreed to sponsor both the live streams and the match highlights for us, which brings a little bit more income into the club at this tricky time. And we thank Stonehouse for that, because it's a big thing for us. We're only a little club, so any income that we can get is beneficial for us, really. So the Cricket 19 matches that have happened in the last week. Last Saturday, we had the second team facing South Shore. South Shore, a team we know very well, both from the six-side competition and from league matches. And it was a bit of a walkover for the seconds. South Shore, I believe, made about 127-ish, something like 124, 127. And the second team knocked it off for 2, I think it was. I'm trying to remember who got the runs for us now. Somebody got a 50, I think. But it was a bit of a walkover, really. And considering that South Shore, in reality, came down out of Div 3 last year back into Div 4, we'll take that one for the second team. Then on Sunday, we had a real special game. We played Parnell Cricket Club of New Zealand. The guys from Parnell had approached us, seen what we've been doing and wanted to play us, and also had given us the incentive that they had at least three New Zealand internationals in their team, including two big guns, Lockie Ferguson, who played in the World Cup final, the fast bowler, and Corey Anderson, a man who had previously held the world record for the fastest international 100. So it was a little bit apprehensive that we went into this, but Lockie Ferguson left us a couple of nice good luck messages, which was nice of him, and the guys at Parnell really supported it great. And again, it was a Watley Dale Select 11, and we walked away with a fairly comfortable victory again. So 2 wins in 2 at the weekend, and then this weekend we have the third 11 playing their second Cricket 19 match, which will be against Wyre. Yet to receive any information from Wyre on that, so hopefully they do. But the match will go ahead anyway, regardless of any information being received. So that'll be Saturday at 1:30, Watley Dale third 11 versus Wyre. Moving on from that, something that has been in the news this week, which I'd like us to touch on, is obviously the big news that clubs are now allowed to practice outside again under obviously very strict guidelines. Now, we looked at those guidelines, we analysed them quite closely, and for ourselves it was decided that because we have a public space, our ground is not wholly owned by ourselves as a cricket club. It is a public recreation ground as well, and we just felt that we could not adhere to certainly the more important guidelines as much as we'd like to. Dave, you were obviously very involved in these conversations. what was your take on how we could or couldn't adhere to those guidelines?
I think the guidelines themselves, quite rightly, they are quite restrictive in terms of there are specific ways in which you can practice your cricket. There's very set out guidelines as to what you can do, when you can do it, distance between batsmen in more than one net. I think you have to have one empty net between nets being used and things like that. Had to have registers and things like that. So it was very thorough. I totally understand why. But as you say, for sort of your local village club like ourselves, I think we just felt it was perhaps a little bit too much of a demand upon the demands of the cricket committee and probably members in general, the playing membership, to be able to do such regulated training. So I think, obviously we were delighted to initially hear about the possible return of practice for members. I'm sure there's a lot of people across the 3 Saturday teams chomping at the bit to get back out there and practicing. But unfortunately, I just don't think, and we thought as a group, we just didn't think we could meet those requirements at this time, which is a shame. But we also took the view that with no cricket in the offing for the foreseeable, there was also possibly limited benefit as well, apart from the obvious, getting out there and exercising, but with nothing to aim for. It just seemed, it sort of, make a decision for us, really.
Gareth, I'm going to come to you, Gareth, on a couple of the issues of the guidelines that we'd spoken about. Obviously, one of them, they're very unique to us in terms of the rental from the Rec Society, and at this moment in time, we have good discussions with the Rec Society in terms of them not wanting to commit to anything immediately until anything's clear for us. And let's face it, if we did go about training again, that would maybe muddy the waters a little bit in terms of what activity we're actually doing. So the combination of that, and also, and again, I mentioned about it being a public recreation ground, the combination of that and potential insurance issues, from your point of view as treasurer and money man, but also as a committee member, those issues would obviously cause us problems as well.
That's right, Neil. And whilst it's incredibly frustrating for the players, I think, as you say, for a club, first and foremost, we've got to protect the club, and we've got to protect the finances of the club going forward and in the future. And with the virus and with the dangers that it being a public open space, and other people could use those facilities if they were seen to be readily available.
Yes,
I just don't think as a club, unfortunately, we could run that risk of there being some unfortunate incident.
Yeah.
And I think from discussions that you've had on social media with other local cricket clubs in our similar sort of size and similar sort of structure, they've also followed similar rules to ourselves in terms of, unfortunately, having to say we can't at this stage, but maybe if some of the lockdown measures get eased a little bit over the next few weeks, then things may change. But unfortunately, and I think it's been understood by the players at the club as well.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think everybody has been very sensible about the approach to it, both from a committee point of view and a club member point of view. Something you touched on there in terms of other clubs we're going to touch on in a moment in general news. But I think what you've also touched on there is something that's quite unique to us as well, in such that there aren't that many other clubs that A, have a public space, but B, have the practice facilities that we do. So a lot of the clubs that are of a similar size to us maybe will have their own ground and practice facilities. The one I'm thinking of is maybe someone like Maudsley, for example.
Yes.
Own ground, own facilities can be remedied quite easily from that point of view. But I think the only one really near us that is similar to us is Gregson Lane. However, Gregson Lane really don't have the practice facilities that we do, so it's not easy to compare and contrast for us. So I think, again, from our point of view, that leaves us as a committee a little bit out on a limb in terms of we don't have anything to go off, so we've got to make the most rational, sensible discussion that we have and then that'll lead to, well, it's led to the decision that it's led to, and I think that's I think we've all made the sensible decision from that point of view, really.
Well, that's right, and especially with not having any certainty around whether the season's even going to commence.
Yeah.
You know, it'd be slightly more, well, even worse, wouldn't it? Situation if we thought, well, we're going to start in July and we can't get any practice in the run-up. But given the current circumstances, I think everyone's accepting of the situation, unfortunately.
Yeah. We're going to move on from that one to something, again, a little bit more, important in terms of running of a small village club, and that's finances. Gareth is the treasurer of the cricket club, and he started that role this year. And we're just going to touch on, I see this week the information's gone out from ECB and government about this initiative of all pulling together as a community, a cricket community. And I know a lot of clubs are suffering quite a lot with finances, and or there's been a lot of how can I put this? A lot of thinking about how clubs are going to survive through this. Now, I know we've had discussions before, and I think we've even mentioned it on the podcast in terms of we're not so bad off at Waltondale in terms of expenditure. But Gareth, just give us an idea as to what's been going on in the club in terms of monitoring expenditure and just planning generally. With finances.
Yeah, certainly, Neil. I mean, as you quite rightly say, we're fortunate that we don't have a huge amount of outgoings. There might be some clubs that have got paid groundsmen, they've got people who in the past would have run a bar, things like that. Yeah. We haven't got any of that. We're fortunate that we've got a good band of willing volunteers who put in their own time to help, help around the club, and there's not an expense for the club.
Yeah.
That said, we have in the past couple of years relied heavily on sponsorship to help support the finances of the club, because we still have day-to-day match-going expenditure, paying the buyers, the equipment, balls, tees, things like that when we're playing. And sponsorship has been a great help, certainly over the last couple of years, to help sort of bolster the coffers of the club, really. Obviously, with no cricket at the moment, we've not been obviously pursuing the sponsorships because it'd be a wasted effort. I think as a club, though, what we have committed to is if we do get some indication that the season will start, to support those local businesses that have supported us over the last couple of years. We've said that we've got the sponsorship banners that we've had from last year. We'll put those up at no income expected from those sponsors, but to support those local businesses and communities in this in this current time.
Yeah.
So we're fortunate that expenditure's not massive at the moment. We've had some very proactive discussions with the Rec Society, who we rent the ground off. In terms of, at the moment, they're not proposing to charge us rent because obviously there's no matches planned. But those discussions and that relationship is vital to a club like ourselves.
I mean, for me, I think the sponsorship thing is a huge thing. I don't want to come across as negative in terms of we're not going to get that money, but I think it's more the relationship we've built with some of those sponsors, both yourself and Naz going out and getting that terrific amount of support that we got last year, bolstered out, that image that we had within the local community from that point of view. And the main sponsors we've got, people like Stonehouse, luckily we retained that relationship with. Brig and Barrel, to an extent, we retain that relationship with those guys. Unfortunately, it's a shame that we can't support them in the way we want to support them as a pub, but and again, the same with the U-Tree, exactly the same scenario. People like Lyndhurst, we've been trying to support them by promoting their good work that they're doing, supplying PPE and stuff like that. For me, the shame is that it's proving more difficult, obviously, because we're not being active or as active as we'd like to be, by not being able to promote these sponsors who have supported us. And that's the negative side of it from my point of view. I think you've said it quite correctly. With limited outgoings, the lack of sponsorship isn't quite as important. We will feel it probably when we restart, whether that's the end of this season or next season, because I'm pretty sure you'll echo these comments. Businesses just won't want to shell out money on support.
And businesses might not even be around next season. You know, that is the unfortunate truth that, you know, some businesses unfortunately might struggle. And you know, I think I was very keen to touch on, you know, it's a community thing, and you know, you run the social media side of the cricket club, and you know, we're trying to push and promote those sponsors and those local businesses, even through social media, just to remind people, and you know, that there's businesses out there in certain areas that we can try and push and remind people that they need supporting as well as, you know, the local cricket club.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. So thanks for that, Jay. Appreciate your input on just giving an idea of where we're at as a club finance wise. We're going to now move on to general cricket news, and something we just touched on in terms of going back to practice, and as Dave and Gareth mentioned, I've been trolling the internet this week in looking for how clubs are proposing to get back to some sort of practice, and it's been quite interesting, the two of you, to see how different clubs are proposing. I mean, obviously a lot of the measures are very similar, but a lot of clubs, as we've discussed, have differing facilities. So a prime example, as we touched on, was Maudsley. They only have, I think, 2 nets. So obviously they can only use one of those nets. So in terms of how they can use that facility, it's very different to, say, somebody like, and I think like someone like Lower House, for example, up near Burnley. You know, a big 5 or 6 lane net facility, plenty of room to run, let's say, 3 nets with a net in between. So it must be vastly different for every club, albeit that the guidelines generally are very similar. But I've got to say, I'm pleasantly surprised at the amount of clubs, large and small, that are trying to make an effort to trial something and to test whether it's feasible to get their players back training or not. Dave, have you been having a look at this? Is this something you've been having a look at?
Yeah, I mean, you've as you've said, you've pointed at some of these out to us, and I suppose it's a bit of a cliche, but it's kind of that, you know, that sort of can-do attitude that you see in local cricket, local sports in general, that, you know, people will find themselves in slightly unusual situations when they're trying to keep your club running, and they'll just react to the situation and try to do the best with it. As you say, some clubs will have no chance of being able to put on training as we've just discussed. Some will be able to, with a few tweaks to the normal way that they go about things. Some will be able to run them fine, but you know, I think you see everywhere that people are just trying their best to get as much training on as they can within the guidelines. And as you say, I think it largely depends on the size of the club, the size of the facilities, and the support that you've got from the membership to be able to put any sort of training on. So I think it is very much one that's just dependent on sort of how you are as a club, really.
Gareth, I know you're an active person. I know you like to go out and do a bit of running and stuff like that. How much, from your perspective, certainly something I've discussed with a couple of other guys locally within the area about cricket, how much is this, do you think, less about actually practicing cricket and more about getting out there and doing something physical again, really, for a lot of clubs?
Absolutely. I think physical exercise is absolutely critical to people's, you know, mental health, and making you feel much better physically and mentally. I think, you know, I know friends of mine, you know, who go out daily making sure they're doing some form of exercise, even, you know, getting up at the crack of dawn, 6:30 before they're working from home, they're going walking 4 or 5 miles, they're going for a run, just to get in that routine and that feeling, that the benefit that sport and physical exercise can bring to an individual. And I think it's absolutely critical that, you know, even though you can't, you know, undertake training facilities at the cricket, there's still other ways people can go out on the bikes, they can walk, they can run, they can do other exercises. And I think, especially at the moment, because it's, you know, we're seeing on the TV, it's Mental Health Awareness Week. You know, it's very important, especially under the current circumstances where not everyone's fortunate that they've necessarily got families or surrounded by families. You know, there might be elderly people who are on their own or different circumstances. So definitely for people's well-being, I think physical exercise and sport is essential.
It's certainly something sorry, Dave, go on.
Just talking from my own perspective, you know, I like Gareth have been out trying to keep running sort of, you know, around 3 times a week, just getting out there, getting some exercise. And as Gareth said during Mental Health Awareness Week, you know, the feeling that, you know, you get when you've finished a run and, you know, you've achieved something, it's worth the 5, 10Ks, whichever you've run to get through it. It's worth its weight in gold. And the way I've looked at it, sort of at the moment, is I'm still trying to keep myself in sort of like pre-season mode. You know, I'm going out on these runs to try and keep fitness up, to bowl a little pie to 22 yards at some point later in the summer, and then trot off down to fine leg. And I've also been trying to do a little bit of cycling as well. And tomorrow I'm going for a little bit of golf in the afternoon. So just trying to keep busy. And as you say, it's just great to get out of the house at this time and being able to do things.
Yeah, and we've been blessed, haven't we, with some decent weather, to be fair.
Absolutely.
Even though times have been hard, at least it could have been a lot worse weather-wise, which would have been, you know, a bit of a, you know, it would have been frustrating when you want to get out there and it's.
So yeah, it's vitally important, isn't it? As you say, and I can understand people wanting to get some cricket practice in, but in our situation, unfortunately, we're just not able to meet that at the current time. But hopefully, in the future, we will be.
Absolutely, and as I say, I think generally speaking, across the majority of cricket clubs, I think a lot of clubs will be thinking similar there, and hoping that their club members will be able to get as much exercise as possible off the back of this. And so I can only see it being a positive thing as long as it's well run, and I'm sure most of the clubs doing that will do so. I'm just going to move on now to a couple of bits of news that have come out recently. England players, bowlers, I believe, restarting training soon, up to I think it was about 18 of them across 7 different venues. We've seen obviously the footballers go back to training as well. Do we think this could be a sign that internal discussions are going on about certainly professional cricket or test cricket being played later in the summer?
That's certainly been muted, hasn't it? And not necessarily in England. They're saying, you know, they're going to maybe have it overseas as well in some safer countries. I think Dubai was mentioned, wasn't it? That they can go and play out there. Personally, though, I still think, and you know, you might say that at Walton Adele we're used to this, but as a professional sportsman, it's got to be very difficult if you're a test player playing in front of no people.
Yeah,
it'd be very much an anticlimax. And you know, whilst yes, I suspect there's probably a lot of pressure from the media, Sky, ECB to get matches on, but as a player and from a player's perspective, playing in an empty stadium, I can imagine when you're used to, you know, playing in World Cup finals and playing like that, it must be a very false environment.
Yeah. I mean,
you know, a spectator, it'll still be good to watch.
Yeah.
You know, there's only so much highlights you can watch, isn't there?
Well, that's it. I was going to touch on, Dave, you're an avid county cricket watcher. I guess some afternoons down at Old Trafford, there's not many more than about 5 in the stadium anyway. So in some cases, it might not be so much of a problem. But certainly from a test perspective, the only thing I guess you can compare it to is obviously, was it Sharjah or where Pakistan used to play when they weren't playing actually in Pakistan? The stadium was usually pretty empty there. But yeah, it can't be a nice experience, put it that way.
No, I mean, talking of Old Trafford, it's championship games, can be sparsely attended, but obviously for the annual victory over Yorkshire in the T20, we're getting, a sellout and things like that. So I think it will make quite a difference to the players if they do end up managing to play over here. I think I've seen reports saying that playing the series against West Indies and Pakistan at Southampton and Old Trafford have been mooted. So, they may still be able to play over here in these biosecure venues with, obviously, they've got hotels on site, which helps. But I think we've seen over the previous weekend with the return of the Bundesliga, it's something that looks familiar. It's football being played by two professional teams with players that but it doesn't quite feel the same, given that it's in front of 4 empty stands.
Yeah.
And I think it will probably be the same with the cricket. It will be the sport that but I think it'll lose some of its charm and its mystique, and the sounds of the crowd getting involved and engaged in the game. It really adds to the atmosphere, not only if you're there in the ground, but also if you're watching on TV as well.
Yeah.
So like Gareth said, if it's on TV later in the summer, I'll be watching. But it won't quite be, as we remembered, the glorious games of last summer, World Cup final and Ashes games. It won't quite be the same, unfortunately. But I think we'd all take what we can at this point in time.
Absolutely. I mean, you touched on the Bundesliga there. I've seen a lot of people complaining that it's not football or whatever. I've got to say, I was glued to the TV over the weekend. Sarah wasn't overly happy with me, but I just about watched every game I could just to absorb myself back into some live sport again. And let's face it, people who are probably watching this, we're all sportsmen or women. We all love our sport. So to get any sport will be a preference. And like you say, Dave, to get any cricket, live cricket, will be a benefit for people, I think. So yeah. Hopefully that'll be the case.
You've not seen much football, have you, over the years, Neil, really, with Hillsborough and what have you, and Sheffield Wednesday?
See, Dave, you had to get the...
I'm opening myself up here, aren't I?
Dave had to get the Yorkshire jibe in, and you had to get the Wednesday jibe in. See,
I know, but I'm opening myself up with my football.
I know, but I can't. Anyway, we'll move on. We'll move on.
Yeah.
So, after looking at that general cricket news, we're going to move on to our one of our new regular features, which is Tales from the Dale, where we ask one of our guests, i.e. Mr. Gareth Winstanley, some of his memories of Wantley Dale, cricket in general, and some cricket feelings on his behalf. So I'm going to hand it over to Dave, who hosts this part. He's the man with the questions. So Dave, go on, ask away.
Yeah, cheers, Neil. So the spotlight falls on you, Gareth, local legend Winstanley. We've got the usual sort of set of questions that we've asked people so far. So I thought we'd start with if you could remember what your earliest cricketing memory was at all.
Earliest cricketing memory? Well, apart from playing sort of in the garden at home with my dad when I was a youngster, was probably playing at school. Went to Hutton Grammar and played for the school team. So that was where I probably learnt a lot of my skills, and I say, playing at home with my dad. I have a younger brother as well who used to play in the garden, and then in sort of teenage years, played at Polytechnic. I was at Manchester, a student, where I came across a certain Mick Cuffin, who introduced me to Wantley Dale. We both played for the sort of the Polytechnic cricket team. Obviously both from Preston, so we hit it off straight away. And Mick had been involved in the youth team in his younger years at Wantley Dale, and he brought me along or introduced me to the club, and been there ever since. So yeah, quite a few years ago.
So if we go back to those days of old, who would you say was your first cricketing hero as a boy?
As a boy, probably someone like David Gower. I was always impressed with the sort of style and panache that he used to play. Right, cricket made it look effortless. Maybe my lack of attendance at training might have rubbed off from watching him. He didn't look to be a keen trainer, did he? But no, I would say someone like that. Poise, elegance, and he just looked as if he was having fun when he played. At the end of the day, it's a sport. It's not life and death. It's a sport, and someone like him. Obviously, growing up as well, was in Botham's Ashes, but yeah, probably David Gower, I would say.
I could see a bit of a right-handed David Gower in G's cover drive. Yeah,
a Winstanley cut.
I could definitely.
Flashing outside the off stump, you mean?
Well, you can call it that, G. I would call it a graceful cover drive, but we'll leave it at that for now.
So if you if David Gower was sort of your first cricketing hero, who would you say is a current cricketing hero that you have now? If you could be any of the current professionals that you see on TV, who would it be?
I mean, I don't think you've got to look any further than someone like Ben Stokes, to be fair. I mean, what he's achieved, certainly in the last 18 months, and under the pressure that he had with the personal issues off the field, to come back and to play those innings, but not just play those innings, but in a high pressured situation, a World Cup final and an Ashes test at Headingley. You're really doing that under the spotlight, and his skills came to the fore, and the way that he sort of controlled his innings. I think the one at Headingley, it took him something like 70 balls to get his first 20 runs, which you think of someone like Ben Stokes, you think necessarily all power and aggressive batting, but he paced himself so well, and it was obviously he had to manipulate the tail with Jack Leach and what have you. But no, I would say Ben Stokes, and he's also got that other string to his bow that he's an outstanding fielder and a very good bowler as well. So yeah, I think it's got to be him.
Yeah, pretty hard to.
I'm going to say I can't disagree with that.
Not to admire him, isn't it?
Well, I've got to say I'd say 2 out of 3 at Bad G. Batting, bowling, fielding. We're all getting on a bit now, so we'll let Ben have his fielding over us. He's all right for that one.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
So you mentioned how you first sort of came across Wantedale and sort of got involved. Can you remember what your first game was for the club?
Crikey. I can. It was away at New Longton. And I suspect it was probably about 1988. Away at New Longton in the first team, and I think I batted at number 10. I batted at 10. I think I got a couple of overs. That was about it. But I was, what would I be then? I would be 20. So yeah, but I was new to the club and took a few years to get established, quite rightly so. But away at New Longton. And
would Mr. Turner have been captain then, Gareth?
He wasn't captain. Gavin would certainly been playing. I was trying to think before. We used to have an opening back, Dickie Latham.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably Dickie who might have been captain when I first started. And then after that, Dave Ray took over. But Gavin was certainly captain later on. And, he had been many years before I was on the scene. And, a fiercely competitor was Gavin. And woe betide you if you made a fielding mistake. Let's put it that way.
I can imagine it was a fairly intense atmosphere to come into as a 20-year-old first timer at the club.
It was, but that's what you want. You don't want easy cricket.
Yeah.
You want to be to prove yourself, and you want to show that you've got skills, and you want to be able to play those to your best of your ability.
Absolutely.
You don't want soft cricket, and there was never any soft cricket where Gavin was involved.
No. Still very much the case now when he's critiquing our performances from the sidelines.
Yes, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
I can imagine. Yeah.
So if that was your first game for the club, what would you say was your favourite? What would you say was your favourite?
Favourite? I think it's probably got to be the 2002 Leigh Cook final that we played at White Coppice. That we were successful and we won that one, and primarily because the year before we also reached the final at New Long-ton, but in all intents and purposes we bottled it. We skittled them out for about 100, 105, and at tea we were almost celebrating in the changing rooms, and then we were skittled out for 60. So the main aim the following season was to prove not just to ourselves but to other teams that we're not bottlers. And I say we got to the final. We had a cracking win over Bristol, who were a really top team, and on paper they're a much better team than us. But yeah, we won quite. I wouldn't say quite easily, but it was a very good win in the dark at White Coppice in 2002. Yeah, it was an excellent game.
Anybody get any runs of note in that one, Gareth?
Go on, Neil.
Anybody get any runs of note in that one?
There was a few contributions. I think me and Naz had a decent stand. I think we put on 100.
Excellent.
In the middle order, and I think early on there was an opener called Darren Folds. I think he got about 30 odd. He set the foundations, but Naz kept me running, I think, that day. You can imagine. Yeah. But he wasn't run out. He wasn't run out.
Well,
I was the one run out, actually. I was the one run later on. So.
Well, every cloud has a silver lining with Naz. If you've not been run out, you got to think yourself lucky. That's for sure.
Yeah. Maybe he ran me out, but yeah.
So, penultimate question now. What's the best performance that you've seen for Walkdale?
I've seen quite a few good performances. I mean, of late, there's been people like Alex Hines, who scored some magnificent centuries, sort of 2015 and around that era. Curtis has had Curtis Morris, some excellent batting and bowling performances. I think he got an 80 once. It might have been against Leyland. That was really top draw. But I think the best for me, we had a chap, Asif Aliwala, who opened the batting and scored about, I think it was about 156 he scored opening the batting in a league game. Probably, I was going to say 10 years ago, but it's probably a little bit longer than that now, probably nearly 15 years ago. But he was an absolutely beautiful batter to watch. A bit like we were talking before, David Gower, very graceful, effortless. Not a big hitter, but you just used to stroke the ball for four. And anyone who can score 150, it's a hell of a player. And it really was one of those knocks that, you'll remember for a long time. And, shame he's not playing these days, but yeah.
I'm going to pick up on Gareth choosing a good batting knock. And I'll not try and feed Gareth's ego too much, but actually, I think it was probably about my second game for the club. I come from Vernon's down to Wantleydale, and I was in the first team. And one of my first experience at the club was a Gareth Winstanley century at home to Caton. Gareth, I think, we got about 111, 113, something like that day. And I came in probably batting around about number 7-ish down the order towards the end of the innings. And Gareth was there, and he was like, right, come on, let's see this over. We got a good score at that point. And I'm a little bit ashamed to say that with Gareth on 111 odd or whatever he was on at the time, I ended up hogging the strike for the end of the innings. And to much amusement from the sideline of people like Mohammed Yunus Shah screaming at me to get on with it. And so I did feel a little bit guilty that day, I've got to say, but it was an honour to watch, in the second match, a cracking innings from Mr. Winstanley, and it was a nice...
I was probably glad for the breather, Neil.
I can probably imagine you would have been, G, because going for that, and I can remember it was a warm day as well, so you probably would have been, but it was a lovely introduction to Wantleydale to see Gareth play a cracking innings and get a century. I'm pretty sure it was my second match, so it was a really good introduction to Wantleydale, that one.
It's funny though, isn't it? All these performances and people that I've talked about have mainly been batters. Yes, I've not really touched on, bowling performances, but it's, again, that's another strand that a lot of people have, and there's been some magnificent bowling performances over the years. I touched on Curtis when I think he got 8.
Yeah.
1 year, didn't he?
He did.
And other people have, we've had the likes of Jake Bolton who were really hostile and aggressive and really bowled well in that 2015 season, and way back. I mean, yourself, Neil. To be fair, you used to get your fair share of wickets.
We spoke about the mop last week.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm afraid those days are certainly after the last 2 seasons. Those days of bowling are long gone, Gareth. So we'll assign those to the memory bank for now.
And so the last question we had was, obviously we spoke about your favourite match and your favourite players and stuff, but when you sit back with a glass of something refreshing on a winter's night, what's your takeaway favourite memory of Wontley-Dale? What's the thing that stands out for you over and above everything?
Yeah, it's funny because I've spoken to Naz about this particular memory quite a few times, and it was cup semi-final several years ago, and we managed to scrape through, and I remember myself and I think Mick Brownie saw us home, but it was more like at the end, everybody we got through, but we needed about 6 and over for about 15 overs, and we're talking 10, 15 years ago when there wasn't any real 2020, so 6 and over was a big ask.
Yeah.
But we got home. But at the end, every team member ran on, and we were just hugging and holding each other. And I remember myself and just Gaius, just like getting a big bear hug off him. It just meant so much that, what it meant to people, a group of lads from all sorts of different backgrounds, walks of life, but with the same aim, same goal, and the same joyous feeling at a particular point in time. And that's what's so entertaining and brilliant about cricket. You meet lads from all sorts of different backgrounds who you wouldn't necessarily, come across in different walks of life, but you meet them, you make friends for life. Not just your own teammates, but also players from other clubs. And there's many characters that I know from other clubs who you still bump into from time to time. You even play with the Suns now, But and that's the beauty of cricket, isn't it? You make friends for life, and it stays with you forever. So yeah.
We actually touched on something similar last week, didn't we, Dave? When we were talking about the 2015 and Kez and Sam. We talked about the winning moment when we all ran on the field, and Sam himself, and I don't think he was too ashamed to admit it, got quite emotional about the fact that this was a group of lads that we'd spent the last 3 or 4 years together playing in the same team through quite difficult times, both on and off the pitch. A lot of stuff had gone on around the club, and to reach that moment where all that hard work had paid off. And yeah, we'd seen it coming during the back end of the season. We knew we were pretty much going to win the league, don't get me wrong. But for that moment, for us all to be stood there as a team, and I think you're right, Gareth, I think that team emphasis, we'll ask that question of a lot of guys, and I think a lot will say it'll be a team moment. It won't be an individual moment.
It's the camaraderie, as you say, that team environment.
Yeah.
Yes, there's individual sports, golf, tennis, running, things like that. But I can't believe you get the same buzz as you do in a team environment when you're successful. There's something about it, isn't there? As we've all experienced.
Absolutely.
And it stays with you for the long winter months or during lockdown period, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more on that one.
Yeah.
Excellent. So that we're done with that, Dave, yes?
We're done indeed.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gareth. Thank you very much for answering those so candidly. And it's great to get different viewpoints. Mick, the last person to do Tales from the Dale, is obviously relatively new to Wontley-Dale Cricket Club after only joining maybe 3 or 4 seasons ago. And with yourself, it's slightly different viewpoint looking back on those Chorley League days, and obviously a long history of Wontley-Dale to look back on, and it's always good to look at those eras as well. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to wrap things up, guys. Thanks everybody for watching. It's been another great experience talking about what's going on in these sort of relatively dark times without cricket, but we're all trying to keep ourselves entertained. We hope we're trying to contribute to that in some small way. And on that note, please don't forget the Cricket 19 match on Saturday. Check out our social media for more updates on that. We'll give you the link for the live stream. And hopefully we should be launching this podcast on Friday the 22nd. So again, keep an eye on social media, and we'll put this up. But thanks again for watching. Dave, thanks for joining us again.
Thanks, Neil. See you again soon.
And Gareth, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you, Neil. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks for watching Up the Dale, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye-bye for now.